Thank you so much for watching Riff TV. Now, this interview is obviously with video, but I don't interview everybody on Zoom. That's why I put it on my Talkin' Rock with Meltdown podcast. We talk to rock artists from all over the genre. So check out Talkin' Rock with Meltdown wherever you get your podcasts. And now to today's video interview. Hey, Harry, good to make your acquaintance. How are you?
I'm doing great, thanks.
You're up there in Toronto. You got a lot of things happening in the world, eh?
Well, yeah, as usual, trying to stay busy, working away. We've got this 30-year anniversary release of Mood Swings that's out now. So yeah, keeping busy with all that.
Yeah, when that record came out, I mean, vinyl was kind of on the downturn. Now all of a sudden it's like you gotta have everything in vinyl.
It's hilarious. We're getting lots of requests from people. Hey, when are you going to release this on vinyl? When are you going to do that? And I was talking to a couple other musician friends, and it was like, if you were putting out records like anywhere between like 1990 and I'll even say like early 2000s, like none of those records were ever released on vinyl. So think of your favorite artists that, these iconic records that now are being re-released, reissued from like literally like a decade of records coming out all over the world. Like the biggest artists in the world are now just kind of getting around to looking at their catalog and reissuing it on vinyl. So a huge resurgence for people that don't know, like vinyl actually eclipsed CD sales last year for the first time since like 1982 or something like that. Right. So wild stuff going on. Yeah. But so yeah, we're hopping on that bandwagon and we're putting out our first ever vinyl version of Mood Swings.
Now, the first record came out in 1991, correct?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay,
yeah.
So talk about Mood Swings here for a second, because, well, first of all, for people that never heard Harem Scarem,
yeah,
I got my like impressions of what you guys sound like and where you kind of are placed in the world. What to tell somebody about your band that's never heard your band?
Well, you know what, we started off literally as teenagers and in the late 80s, and we were kind of just playing music that we heard on the radio. And at that time, oddly enough, it was like Whitesnake, Bon Jovi, Def Leppard. So in my years of just starting out playing in a band and just kind of playing what was popular, it was what's considered now classic rock, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's what we were doing. And then, as we got our record deal in the early 90s, put out our first record in 91, and it was pretty much straight ahead pop rock kind of thing in that sense, but then veered into, dare I say, even the grungy era. We were influenced by it. We actually kind of liked it, which was not cool for a long-haired band to like the thing that came and kind of killed rock, right? So it was a weird position to be in, but I loved Alice in Chains, loved Soundgarden, and love that stuff. And of course, huge fan of classic rock as well. So I just liked what I thought was good. It didn't matter like kind of what you called it. But so we went through a bunch of iterations of what we even were as a band, how we sounded. We never really broke and did like, crazy gangbusters, business ever. So we were left in a position where we felt like we can kind of do whatever we want, because it's not like anyone has any expectations of who we are and what we do, right? Which was kind of cool. So we ran the gamut. We did like everything from like what sounded like from Metallica to Queen to super, poppy, up-tempo kind of happy sounding stuff. So we did it all over, the 30 plus years that we've been putting out records. And now it's settled into more kind of like what's on Mood Swings, which was our second record. And that was the one that did the best for us internationally. On our first record, we came out in Canada, Spain, and Portugal. And by the end of Mood Swings, we were out in over 50 countries. So that was a big leap for us. And most people heard of us first on our second record.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that, because like when I listen to this, I kind of hear some Honeymoon Suite, and I hear some of the stuff that was around at the time, like the Alarm, the Hooters, that kind of stuff, like kind of that rock pop genre in there. And then I was going to say, so 1993 comes along, and by then, like grunge was really the thing that was going in 1993.
Yeah. And, so that really put the kibosh on us getting any kind of radio support or action at that time because everything just shifted. Fortunately, because of the band coming out in over 50 countries, we had tons of support in Europe and specifically Asia, Japan, the old classic. We're big in Japan. And the Philippines. We had a gold record in the Philippines because they loved rock ballads.
Mhm.
And so on our first record, we had a couple rock ballads, and it just did really, really well. And to this day, they're our biggest territory. So on one hand, it kind of ended for us rather quickly in North America, but just continued and flourished in Europe and Asia, which was not a normal thing, right? So we kept doing what we were doing because most bands that were doing what we were doing that time got dropped. They weren't even making records anymore. And we just kept going. And here we are literally 30 something years later.
Yeah, they say like what's old is new again, but it's like Mr. Big does the same thing. It's like they'll play here for maybe theaters or smaller theaters, then they go overseas, they're playing arenas.
Well, I happened to be in Malaysia working on a record once, and Mr. Big, they were on Warner as well, and they said, oh, we were actually staying at the same hotel, so they're like, oh, you should come out to the show tonight. So I go, and it's a friggin' stadium, and there's 40,000 people there. Yeah, so I know exactly what you mean. And those guys would tour Japan. They would do like 10 dates in Japan, and yeah, just kill it. Yeah, Budokan, the classic, big arena vibe. Yeah.
Yeah. So tell me the status of the band right now. Where are you guys at?
Well, we wanted to do something for this 30-year anniversary release. So we released this on vinyl. We also included a CD in the package where we did 5 acoustic bonus tracks. So we just did that now in 2023. And we've actually signed on to do some live dates at the end of the year. We're doing a festival in Belgium, heading back to Portugal, possibly Spain. That usually, when we hit Europe, we'll do like anywhere between 10 to 15 dates out there. And we've been doing that forever, and possibly Japan again, but we'll probably come back and maybe work on a new record if that's in the cards.
I was going to say, you got to play multiple dates out there just to make it financially worth it, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if you're going to bother even rehearsing and learning a set, we're not on the road all the time as an ongoing band or entity. So we get together when we book a tour, we rehearse, we literally relearn our own songs because it's easy to forget. And so, yeah, you got to get into a rehearsal hall and go, oh yeah, that's what this does. And we go out, we play a bunch of warm-up shows around here. Then we head off to Europe or Asia and kind of make the most of it, because yeah, if you're going to bother flying all the way over to Europe, you want to hang there for at least a few weeks to make it worth your while. And it's fun too. We've strategically picked our moments and our places where we like to go. So, Spain, Portugal, Italy, especially around the winter time, it's a good hang, good fun for us.
Yeah, I was just talking with someone, Jared Weeks from Saving Abel the other day, and it's like, their music has allowed them to go all over the world and play for the troops and whatnot. But you're talking about your music being able to take you all over the world. That's cool.
Yeah. I mean, really, really fortunate, really lucky, and even at a young age, like in our early 20s, starting to tour the world. And because we did well internationally, obviously we got offers to play. And there aren't a lot of countries where that I haven't been to. So I consider myself fortunate for sure.
That's killer. So, I grew up in Buffalo, and then I've been here since 1995 in Detroit. So I've always had like that Canadian kind of thing, like bleeding in, especially back when I grew up in Buffalo, because, you had your Kim Mitchells and Tragically Hips and Coney Hatches and all those bands right there. And of course, I remember hearing about Harem Scarem as well. So did you guys must have toured a lot in Canada back in the 90s, correct?
We did. I think we crossed the country multiple times on our first 2 records. We even did a couple of tours with April Wine. They were another classic Canadian rock band, and did a bunch of shows on our own as well. So yeah, I mean, opening slots, little larger club headlining things, and we did that solid for years and years and years. And even pre our record deal, that's what you did, right? So if you were in a band, even a quote unquote bar band back in the day, That's what you did. You got in a van, you traveled across the country. And in Canada, let me tell you, that is not fun. You know, even once we had our record deal and we're selling records, you know, getting from Calgary to Edmonton and then your next gig's in Vancouver, you're literally driving 18 hours. And sometimes you would just make it to sound check from leaving the last gig. And you drove like, you know, whatever, 15 hours to get to the next gig. And when you're in Europe, sometimes you're driving an hour, 2 hours, and you're in the next country. And, you know, there's millions of people there. Like, so Canada is about the toughest place on the planet to tour, just physically getting from spot to spot. And then a lot of times you're doing it in the winter, and it's
that's the worst. Yeah, no doubt.
The worst, absolute worst. Driving through the mountains in a Winnebago with no snow tires, sliding down a hill. It's awesome.
Yeah. You know, there's no like physical wall between America and Canada, but why is it that some bands seem to seep into America and just find success and some don't?
Well, I mean, even for us, like yourself, living on a border country, you would get Canadian radio stations, right? So what I would hear from people is they say, oh yeah, you know, I grew up in Buffalo or Detroit or whatever. And they say, I heard you guys on the radio. So if we were signed to Warner, which we were, but if we didn't get an American release through Warner, then American radio stations weren't, you know, aware that we even existed other than the border cities. And that was true of every country. So, you know, if you're signed to a multinational company like a Warner, Universal, or Sony, it's really up to the individual territory whether they want to release your record or not. So you're literally at the whim of somebody there in the international marketing department that decides this will do well, that won't do well. I like this, I don't like that. And that's really what it came down to at the end of the day. So we never got released in America through the first 11 years of being in a band. It wasn't until we went indie that we started doing licensing deals all around the world. Like the UK and America, the two biggest territories for what we do, never released us in the first 11 years of our career. So yeah, we were up against it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you know, even a band like Tragically Hip, you know, as legendary as they were in Canada, I think they'd go down to like maybe Kentucky or Texas or somewhere and play small theaters, you know, but in Canada, they were monsters.
Yeah, that's right. And I mean, of course, you know, every band wants to break in America, no matter where you're from. And the competition is just, you know, it's huge, right? So signing a deal in Canada is not something I would recommend if you're trying to break internationally, right? Because just the incentive for the American companies to get involved and a band that's signed in Canada where, you know, it's a numbers game and a money thing at that point. I can report after all these years. But at the time, you know, when you're a teenager and you're signing a record deal, you literally don't care. Like I didn't care. I just wanted to make records. I wanted to go out and play. And the money was just secondary, or however the career, you know, path would take us. It didn't really matter to me at the time.
And as a kid, though, growing up in Canada, like I'm sure some bands here in Detroit, it's like, I want to be big in Detroit, or I want to be big in Toronto or something. Then you get older, you're like, man, I missed out on that. Or, you know, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Hindsight's 2020, right? So yeah, no, that's exactly true. And yeah, as you get older and you figure out how these things work and maybe what you should have done, but I think that's true of almost everything in life, right? Like you kind of figure it out along the way. But in the music business, it's, you know, you're most valuable when you're younger, right? You have the most to offer to record companies and people want to get involved. And that's why you see a lot of, you know, pop artists. They're not 50-year-old men driving a station wagon that are taking over the pop world. But
that's for sure. Yeah, no question about that. So you've had a chance to work with some pretty legendary bands, and you know, one of which I know that you worked with 3 Days Grace. I've talked with these guys about this before too, and I think that their deal they signed, and don't quote me on this, but I think their deal was a Canadian and American deal through their record company. But
well, actually, in my studio we developed they did all their early demos in my studio. And so those guys I've known, literally, they looked like they were 12 years old when they first showed up in my studio and started doing their demos. But yeah, they did a co-deal, which which worked out very well for a lot of Canadian bands, where you had an American counterpart that was also invested in the group and the well-being of, how it would go. So those guys have done incredibly well, and yeah, a great Canadian success story in the rock world for sure.
Yeah, I'm gonna see those guys on Monday when they open up their tour with Shine down here in Michigan, and
Right,
just
right.
good guys. I love those guys.
Yeah.
But who else have you worked with that we would know?
Well, I mean, my studio, oddly enough, so I bought a studio from a guy named Arnold Lanny about 25 years ago. I've had my own studio forever, but the one that I bought particularly, he did all the early Our Lady Peace records, and Finger 11 was another band that he did in there that did really well. And then when I took it over, just a lot of friends that were producers, engineers, loved the room and wanted to come and work there. So 3 Days Grace was one. Billy Talent was another one that was developed out in my studio. Over the years, we've done some other names you might know. Big Wreck is another Canadian rock band. Blue Rodeo is another one. Great Big Sea. I'm just rattling off some Canadian acts. And again, yeah, Our Lady Peace, those first two records. The second one, Clumsy, was one of the biggest selling records in Canadian music history. Like it's like well over 1 million records, which is a diamond selling record in Canada. So yeah, quite a list. And we even had Muse in there. They cut a single, and yeah, so some really cool stuff over the years.
Yeah, that is cool. When I lost my job in Buffalo, I actually auditioned at 97.7 Hits FM.
Okay, yeah.
And I actually played the Rainbow Butt Monkeys.
Well, that was Finger 11.
Finger 11.
That's right. Yeah, so you know the inside scoop on that one. I wonder why they changed their name.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they were, so they were one of the ones out there too. Yeah, look, when you think about it over the years, like Canada, for having like, I guess we're around 30 something million now. When you think of, Bryan Adams, Shania Twain, like just some of the iconic records that have come out of Canada that sold 20 million records around the world, like we do pretty good. We punch above our weight, I think, with a lot of the acts that come out and do well internationally. So yeah, I'm happy to say a lot of them have worked in my studio, and I've mastered a lot of records as well that were played all over Hits FM back in the day.
Hits
Still
FM
today. Yeah.
Don't forget about my friends in Nickelback. Well, you guys can keep Justin Bieber, okay? You can have him.
Good old Biebs. Yeah, there's another guy that sold a lot of records. I forgot all about him. Yeah.
So what kind of circles did you run with back in the late 80s, early 90s as far as bands? Were you friends? I mean, was there this scene in Toronto? Because I know a lot of bands came out of there, like Killer Dwarfs and Coney Hatch, and I'm sure there's a billion of them I've forgotten about. But what other kind of bands were you running with?
Yeah, that's exactly right, of that era, because if you're playing downtown Toronto, you're either going to see those bands, or you just run into them on the road, or playing a festival, or doing a date where there's 4 or 5 of those acts on the roster. So yeah, even Andy Curran and Coney Hatch, I reminded him, I go, yeah, you know what? Like I was 15, 16 years old and we opened for Coney Hatch in Oshawa, Ontario. And he's like, oh yeah, I remember that gig. And so somehow, somewhere along the way, you would definitely run into any Canadian rock band that was doing what you were doing. And the scene was very, very vibrant in the, mid to late 80s and early 90s. It's what everybody my age did. So if you were 17 to 20 something, whatever, you were going to clubs and seeing rock bands and live music. That's what you did. Now there's a lot of other things that people do, but back then that was it. That's all you did, right?
Yeah, no doubt. I suppose you either went to clubs and watched bands or played hockey, right? Is that the two?
That's exactly right. Or tried to do both. Right?
Or yeah. Some of you guys think that you're hockey stars, right? No.
Yeah, well, that's we tried. Yeah.
The Theory of a Dead Man guys, they play hockey. I'm trying to think of who else I played. Yeah, I haven't played hockey with those guys yet. Mark from Dirty Honey. Have you ever heard of Dirty Honey?
No, I've heard the name, but I don't know them.
Great hockey player. I played hockey with him a few times, but but yeah, I remember though, like I said, growing up, and that music would bleed over into the States with the Kim Mitchell and stuff. And yeah, and I'm trying to remember what other bands were there around there in the late 80s I'm missing.
There were some local bands that did well in Ontario. Again, Slick Toxic was
Slick Toxic. I remember that.
Sven Galley was another one. There's still, I mean, I know Sven Gali is just putting out a new record now and stuff like that. So there's lots of bands that are still kicking, or, you know, they just came back together because, you know, we all hit this age that we're like, hey, you know what? This was fun. Let's do it again for fun, as opposed to trying to become a rock star or trying to make it or rely on it or anything like that. I mean, fortunately for me, I stayed in the music business and this is all I've ever done. But, you know, I've had a lot of friends that just kind of had to bow out, you know, in their mid 30s and then are maybe coming back at it again in their early 50s just to do it for fun, because it is fun.
Yeah, they had to get a real job, as someone said.
Exactly. Yeah.
Slick
Yeah.
Toxic, man. How close were you with the Anvil guys? Or those guys were a little bit ahead of you, probably, right?
Yeah, they were a little bit older, but Anvil, I was at a studio for 5 years called Phase One Studios, and they did a record in my studio at that time, and it was heavy duty entertainment for me because again, on many levels. But
Yeah.
you know, growing up as a kid, being aware of Anvil, and even being like 12 or 13 and going to like a local concert at an arena and watching Anvil, Goddo, you know, bands like that. It just seemed like they were just giant rock stars, you know. So really cool to later on run into them and know them. Helix, Lee Aaron was another one. You know, we did opening shows for them when we were like, you know, 14, 15 years old, and they seemed like music icons and veterans at that point.
Yeah, I think Sass Jordan's from up there too, correct?
Sass Jordan as well. Yeah,
I remember Sass, yeah. Well, let me ask you about this. I don't want to get off on a tangent on Canadian bands, but I love talking about this. But have you intertwined or hung out with the Triumph or Rush guys?
Well, yeah, I mean, you know, again, studio owner Gilmore, drummer in Triumph, literally has a studio about 10 minutes away from where I'm sitting right now.
What's that called? I think
Metalworks.
Metalworks.
Yes, Metalworks studio. So, you know what? Every once in a while, like, you know, I'll end up over there working on a project, or just, you know, I was there a couple of weeks ago. And so, yeah, you know, we'll run into each other every once in a while. And so, you know, hanging around for 30, 35 years, you're eventually going to run into somebody. And I just mastered a project called Envy of None.
Yeah,
with my buddy Andy Kern, and of course it's, you know, Alex Lifeson on guitar from Rush. And so yeah, some small little connections, 6 degrees of separation.
No, that's great.
Canada, right?
Yeah, I only met Alex Lifeson once. I actually wrote about this. It got a huge response. But, you know, what do you say to Alex Lifeson when you meet him? Well, I told him how much I enjoyed him and the Trailer Park Boys.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Another iconic, you know, brand that everybody loves. Yeah.
I've actually met and hung out with those guys several times because Darren McCarty is one of my buddies. And, of course, they're big hockey guys. So they got to hang out with D-Mac.
Yeah. It all makes sense, doesn't it?
Well, I'll tell you what, Harry, we'll cut you loose. I know you got other things going on, but Harem Scarem, you got this. Is it a box set, a deluxe vinyl?
Yeah, we're calling it Deluxe Anniversary Edition. Yeah.
Mood Swings, yeah.
Yeah.
It's cool. By the way, the song "There Was a Time," right?
Yeah, if there was a time, yeah.
I was expecting it to be the Guns N' Roses song, but it wasn't. But I'm just teasing. That song was.
I didn't know there was one. I'll have to listen to it.
On their Chinese Democracy record, they have a song, There Was a Time, which is which is initially about somebody, apparently.
Oh, okay. I'll have to check into the backstory on that one.
Yeah. Hey, we'll look you up on the socials and stuff. And thanks so much for your time. It's great to talk with you.
Love it. All right. Thanks again. All right. Talk soon.